Hey everyone, I'm Sophia. I poured my soul into building a legacy, only to have it snatched away in a heartbeat by the very people I called family. Imagine, one minute you're the architect of your dream, the next, you're a ghost in its hallways. But they underestimated one thing: the quiet strength of a woman who knows her worth. What happened next? Well, let's just say the truth has a way of rewriting the script. The morning air always had a particular scent around the Reed Industries tower, a mix of crisp lake breeze and the subtle, expensive perfume of ambition. That scent, it used to fill me with pride, a reminder of every late night, every risk, every piece of myself I'd poured into the glass and steel structure that bore our family name, my name. I walked through those imposing front doors, the ones I'd personally approved the design for, and my heels made this sharp, confident click on the polished granite. It used to sound like a declaration. That morning, it felt more like counting down to something I couldn't yet see. I smoothed the lapel of my charcoal gray blazer, a habit, and my eyes instinctively went to the large brushed steel lettering behind the main reception, Reed Industries, and beneath it, smaller but distinct, Sophia Reed, founder. For a fleeting second, a warmth spread through me. That still means something, I thought. The receptionist, a new girl whose name I hadn't quite learned, offered a quick, nervous smile before her eyes darted back to her monitor. Odd, a little prickle of unease. I was headed to the main conference room on the 40th floor, the one with the panoramic city views, bracing myself for the quarterly investor strategy session. I'd spent weeks, months even, fine-tuning that presentation. But before I could even press the elevator button, a young man, an intern maybe, rushed up, slightly out of breath. "Oh, Ms. Reed, here," he said, almost shoving a sleek, expensively printed program into my hand. We weren't sure if you were coming in this early." "Coming in early for what?" I frowned, but he was already scurrying away like he'd delivered a summons. I glanced down at the program. The heavy cardstock felt cold in my hand. CEO Transition Ceremony, honoring our legacy, embracing the future. The font was grand, almost regal. My eyes scanned the list of speakers. Harrison Reed, Evelyn Reed, Cassidy Reed. My name, it was there, tucked away at the bottom in tiny, almost apologetic print. Sophia Reed, founder. No speech, no mention of my continuing role. Just a historical artifact. My heart didn't just thud, it felt like it seized, a cold fist clenching in my chest. The polished granite floor, usually so solid, so familiar beneath my heels, suddenly seemed to tilt, like the whole world had shifted on its axis without warning. I pushed open the heavy oak doors to the conference room, and there they were, all of them. Investors I'd courted, executives I'd mentored, my parents, and Cassidy. She was standing near the podium, draped in a cream-colored designer suit that probably cost more than my first car, absolutely glowing, like she'd just been crowned queen of the world. My gaze swept the familiar seating arrangement. My usual chair, the one three down from the center, the one I'd occupied for every significant meeting for the past decade, had a new gleaming placard. It read, "Cassidy Reed, Chief Executive Officer." My name vanished. An usher, someone I didn't recognize, gestured vaguely towards the far end of the longest row, almost an afterthought. No nameplate, just an empty chair. I sank into it, my movements slow, deliberate, the plush fabric feeling alien. The lights in the room dimmed, and a warm, almost theatrical spotlight hit the stage. My father, Harrison, stepped forward. He was all paternal charm and confident posture, gripping the microphone like he was about to deliver a sermon. "Today," he began, his voice resonating with that familiar, persuasive timbre, "we celebrate the very foundation this company was built upon." and we honor the quiet, tireless builder behind it all. My eldest daughter, Sophia. A ripple of applause, polite but distant, like rain on a faraway roof. She's the hammer, the stone, he continued, his eyes briefly, unreadably meeting mine. The vision that gave us these walls, this future. I blinked, a knot tightening in my throat. Something cold whispered a warning inside me. He's not finished. And then, with a broad smile, he turned, gesturing dramatically towards my sister. And now we embark on a thrilling new chapter, one of dynamic innovation, unparalleled visibility, and sheer brilliance. Please join me in welcoming our new Chief Executive Officer, Cassidy Reed. The applause this time, it was a deafening roar, an explosion of sound louder than anything I'd ever heard in that room, certainly louder than any applause directed at me. I felt frozen, pinned to my chair. Cassidy glided onto the stage, her smile radiant, practiced. She began her speech, and a chilling wave of recognition washed over me. I knew those words. I'd written those words. Not for her, not for this. It was from a company culture keynote I delivered 2 years ago during the toughest phase of our expansion. She'd lifted it, inflection for inflection. Legacy isn't just what we leave behind, she purred into the microphone. It's the breath we pour into what still grows. I remembered whispering those exact words to my exhausted team when we were pushing through a market downturn. When morale was a fragile thing I held in my hands. Cassidy. Cassidy had been in Europe then, finding herself, on a 6-month sabbatical I'd reluctantly approved. Now she was using my voice, my conviction, to claim my position. Ben Carter, from marketing, a good guy I'd hired straight out of business school, caught my eye for a nanosecond. His expression was a mixture of shock and pity. I managed a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, a forced twitch of my lips I hoped looked like a smile. I would not cry, not here, not in a room full of people cheering for my erasure. My mother, Evelyn, never once looked my way. She beamed at Cassidy, her hand fluttering to her pearls, a picture of maternal pride. Of course, the realization hit me with the force of a silent, internal blow. They'd planned this for months, without a word to me. I sat there, hands clenched so tight under the heavy mahogany table that my knuckles ached. Not shaking, just still, like stone. My fingers brushed against something familiar in my blazer pocket. The old fountain pen, the one from my high school graduation. Engraved along its silver barrel were 2 tiny letters, SR, and the words, "Keep Building." A gift from my mother, presented the day I got my acceptance letter to the architecture program I'd dreamed of. Funny, isn't it? I rolled it between my thumb and forefinger, its cool weight a small, solid anchor in the swirling chaos. I remembered her words that day, her voice soft but firm. You don't need noise to be powerful, Sophia. True strength is built in the quiet. I gripped it tighter. You want quiet? Oh, I'll give you quiet, but not the quiet of defeat, the quiet of calculation, the kind of quiet that doesn't just fade away, it echoes. I didn't storm out. I didn't make a scene. When the standing ovation for Cassidy finally began to subside, I rose. I walked past the smiling faces, past the lingering applause, past the heavy glass doors, and straight towards the main elevator bank. I pressed the button for the top floor, my floor, or what I'd always believed to be my floor, and kept my face a neutral mask, my spine rigid. But inside, oh man, inside something was unraveling. Silently, yes, but with terrifying speed. When the elevator doors whispered open, I stepped into a hallway that used to feel like a welcome. Now it just felt empty, sterile, like it had already forgotten me. I made a beeline for my office, the corner office with the view that stretched all the way to the lake. my heels tapping a rhythm on the marble that I hoped still sounded like I owned the place. The first real blow landed the moment I sat down at my desk. My beautiful, expansive desk. I powered on my computer, typed in my credentials, password, two-factor authentication code, the whole dance. Access denied. I blinked, typed it again, slowly this time, checking each character. Access denied. A third time. Account locked. My heart didn't race. It did something worse. It slowed, each beat heavy, painful. I pushed back from the desk just as my assistant, Chloe, a bright young woman I'd hired last year, peeked her head around the door. Her steps faltered when she saw me. She was clutching a tablet in one hand, her other hand gripping her phone like it was a lifeline. "Hey, Sophia," she said, her voice thin, brittle. It, it said your account is undergoing a transition." "A transition?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. She swallowed hard, avoiding my eyes. "They said, per new leadership protocol." My stomach twisted into a painful knot. "I need access to my project files, Chloe," I said, keeping my voice even, though it took effort. "The pitch decks for the new quarter, the R&D updates for the Alpha project." She hesitated, her gaze flicking towards the door. I'll have to check with Cassidy." The name dropped between us like a stone. Chloe looked down, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Then, in a near whisper, she added, They already changed your title in the global directory." I didn't reply. I just stood up, a strange calm settling over me, and walked past her. The hallways looked the same, the art I'd chosen still on the walls, the lighting I'd approved still casting the same glow. But it all felt wrong, like walking through a meticulously staged replica of your life. I passed the alcove where my official portrait once hung, a photo of me, arms crossed, a genuine smile on my face, standing in front of the first prototype lab we'd built. Now, a generic brushed metal frame held a pastel-colored motivational poster. "Success is a team sport." They hadn't even bothered to patch the tiny screw holes from my picture. The disrespect was a small, sharp sting. I continued walking, past the collaborative workspace I'd designed when open concept was just a buzzword, past the glass-enclosed innovation hub I'd personally pitched to skeptical investors, past every milestone, every testament to my work, until I reached the far end of the floor, the new executive wing. I'd overseen its construction, fought for the budget, even personally guaranteed a portion of the financing when the board got cold feet. I remembered signing that last check, 7 figures, and thinking, with a surge of pride, this is where we grow next. Now a gleaming gold plaque was affixed beside the polished double doors. The Cassidy Reed Leadership Center. No mention of me, not a footnote, not a whisper. I stared at it for a long, long time, the way the light caught her name, so shiny, so smug. And then I did something I hadn't done in years, not since I was a teenager. I turned my back on it all and walked out, not hurried, not ashamed, but not ready to scream either, not yet. I made it to the parking garage, the cavernous space echoing with a hollow silence. I sat in my car, the engine off, just sat. The silence was so thick, so absolute. I could hear the faint ticking of the engine as it cooled. My hand reached for my phone, instinctively opening my contact list. I scrolled past my mother's name, past Cassidy's, past the family group chat that now felt like a monument to a lie. My thumb hovered over a name I hadn't dialed in years. Not since we fought off that hostile takeover attempt when the company was still young and vulnerable. Marcus Thorne, legal counsel. A man who knew every contract I'd ever signed, every clause I'd insisted upon, every battle I'd won in the fine print. I didn't call, not yet. Instead, I reached into my tote bag, pulled out my worn leather-bound journal, and flipped to a fresh page. My handwriting, when I finally put pen to paper, looked surprisingly calm, much calmer than the storm raging inside me. They took everything with smiles, I wrote, but I kept one thing, the truth. I paused, then underlined the word truth twice, pressing so hard the pen almost tore the page. Something shifted in my chest then. Not quite anger, at least not the hot, explosive kind. This was something denser, older, like coal slowly compressing, waiting for the spark. I closed the journal and set it on my lap. My hand brushed the inside pocket of my bag and landed on the fountain pen again, the one from graduation. SR Keep Building. I held it, tracing the initials, feeling its familiar weight. It carried more than ink. It carried years of hope, of effort. I remembered graduation night so clearly, standing on our front porch, the scent of my mother's roses heavy in the summer air, my cap slightly askew. Mom had adjusted my tassel, then pressed the pen, wrapped in a piece of crisp parchment, into my hand. "You don't let them define your legacy, Sophia," she'd whispered, her eyes serious. "You define it, quietly if you must, but completely." That same mother, the one who had stood in that boardroom this morning and clapped, her face alight with pride, for Cassidy. I looked out across the rows of parked cars, the late morning sun casting long, stark shadows. I wasn't crying, no, but something behind my eyes burned, hot and dry, like old paper just before it catches flame. I took a deep, steadying breath, clicked the pen open, and began to write again. I got home just before 11. The city felt muted, suspended in that strange, surreal quiet that often follows a life-altering shock. I'd parked in my usual spot in the building's garage, ridden the same elevator up 4 floors, turned the same key in my apartment lock. But everything felt off, like walking into a hotel room you vaguely remember staying in once, a place that was once familiar but now holds no trace of you. The apartment was clean, thank goodness for my once-a-week cleaning service, dimly lit by the kitchen sconces I kept meaning to replace with something brighter. I slipped off my shoes by the door and just stood there for a long moment, coat still on, bag still hanging from my shoulder. I didn't want to move, didn't want to sit down. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to process, to react, before it would allow me to rest. Eventually, I made my way to the small antique desk tucked into the corner of my living room, the one overlooking the city lights. I didn't bother turning on the desk lamp. I reached into the bottom drawer, the one that always stuck a little, and pulled out an old soft leather folder. It was worn at the edges, creased from years of being shoved into briefcases, forgotten under piles of conference notes and blueprints. I'd actually tossed it in the glove compartment of my car about 2 years ago, fully intending to file it properly. But, well, life. Funny how life lets you procrastinate on almost everything, except, it seems, betrayal. I untied the faded ribbon and flipped through the pages. Stock agreements, trademark certificates, LLC formation documents for Reed Industries. The faint, distinctive smell of aged paper and old printer toner clung to everything. And then I saw it. A single page, titled in neat, unassuming type, "Founder Role Revision, Reed & Co." My name was just below it, Sophia Reed, and then, at the bottom, a single damning signature, mine. A slow, pulsing heat crept up my neck, into my face. I picked up the page, my hand surprisingly steady, and brought it closer to the weak light filtering in from the kitchen. No one ever calls these things what they really are, do they? They use soft corporate words like streamlining or succession clarity or foundational restructuring. But this was a surrender. This was the exact moment I had, with my own hand, unknowingly signed my own erasure. And I remembered. Oh God, I remembered exactly when I did it. I was 26, maybe 27, riding the exhilarating high of our second major investment round, utterly burnt out but so incredibly proud. My eyes were still full of the dream, of what we were building, what I was building. We were in Dad's study, that old wood-paneled room that always smelled of his cigars and old books. He'd handed me the form with one of his reassuring smiles, a glass of his best Pinot Noir in his other hand. "It's just legal housekeeping, sweetheart," he'd said, his voice like warm honey, tapping the paper casually with his pen. "You'll always be my partner, my right hand. This is just to make sure Cassidy's role is clear to the board for her future incentives. A formality. Clear." He'd said it like it was a shield for her, not a weapon against me. I remembered feeling so tired that night, bone-achingly weary. I didn't read the fine print. Why would I? I trusted him, implicitly. I needed to believe that being his daughter, his firstborn, the one who shared his supposed passion for building, still meant something more profound than just shared DNA. Now, that trust felt like something vile and sticky on my skin, something I couldn't scrub off no matter how hard I tried. I set the page down on the desk and stood up abruptly, needing air, needing space. I walked to the window, staring out at the glittering, indifferent skyline. And then, like a cold whisper just behind my ear, a memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. A party, last year. We were hosting a fundraising gala for the New City Arts Initiative, held on the rooftop terrace of a chic boutique hotel downtown. I'd slipped into the corridor near the restrooms to fix a stubborn clasp on my bracelet, and I heard them, Cassidy and one of her socialite friends, their voices muffled but distinct, giggling from behind the ornate bathroom door. "She builds, I brand," Cassidy had laughed, her voice dripping with that careless, wine-fueled confidence. "Honestly, darling, she won't even notice what I'm acquiring." There was a pause, then more laughter, light and cruel. I remember shaking my head at the time, a small, indulgent smile on my face. Sibling rivalry, I'd told myself. Just Cassidy being dramatic. Noise not worth feeding. Now it played back in my mind like a cold, hard confession. Dressed up in designer silk and smug satisfaction, I returned to the desk and sat down heavily. The legal form lay there, stark and damning, like a piece of evidence at a crime scene. I picked up my pen, the good one, the one Mom had given me at graduation, and started jotting notes on a fresh pad of paper. Words, phrases, they just formed. She builds. I brand. You'll always be my partner. Just legal housekeeping. It all pointed to one chilling conclusion. They never thought I'd fight back. They assumed I'd just keep building, keep toiling in the quiet, while they systematically renamed every single brick I laid, every foundation I poured. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the shadowed ceiling, my heart beating steadily now, but slow, cold, and hard. Then, almost without conscious thought, I reached for my phone, opened my messages, and scrolled down to that name. Marcus Thorne. I tapped his number. It rang once, twice. He picked up with the same calm, direct voice I remembered from all those years ago, a voice that had always managed to cut through the noise. "Sophia?" he said, no surprise in his tone. "I was wondering when you'd call." And I exhaled, a sound that caught somewhere in my throat, halfway between profound relief and the first flicker of a gathering fire. Morning light, when it finally came, filtered through my blinds in thin, slanted stripes, like prison bars painted a deceptive gold. I hadn't slept, not a wink. I didn't need sleep. I needed answers. I needed clarity. I showered mechanically, barely noticing the temperature of the water. I threw on a dark navy blazer, the same one I'd worn when I pitched our first round of angel investors, over a simple silk blouse. slid my company key card into my bag out of sheer ingrained muscle memory. Reed Industries might have wiped my name from their website, from their future, but the walls of that building, they still knew who built them. They had to. Midtown traffic was surprisingly kind to me that morning. It was barely past 8 when I pulled into the familiar underground garage beneath the Reed Industries tower. The same security guard, a man named Sal, I'd exchanged pleasantries with for years, nodded at me out of habit, then did a double take. His eyes darted down to his walkie-talkie, a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. I nodded back, a brief, neutral acknowledgement, and didn't break my stride. The lobby, usually bustling at this hour, felt different. It smelled of polished stone, yes, but also of a new, cloying lavender diffuser oil. Intentional, cold, impersonal. I walked towards the main elevator bank and swiped my badge. Nothing. A small red light blinked once. I tried again, pressing it firmly against the reader. Still nothing. Denied. Behind me, a soft, hesitant voice. "Ms. Reed?" I turned. A receptionist I barely recognized, probably only a couple of months into the job, stood at the massive marble desk, her eyes wide, fingers nervously twisting a pen. I, I was told not to let you up." A thick silence stretched between us. I didn't feel anger, not then, just a profound, wearying absurdity. She looked away first, her cheeks coloring. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I pressed my lips together into a thin line and nodded once. Not at her, at the situation. No directory listing, no working badge. And now, apparently, no clearance to enter the very building I'd helped finance, from blueprint to gleaming brick. I stepped aside, out of the flow of actual employees, and waited in a quiet corner of the expansive lobby, feeling like an unwelcome guest in my own life. That's when I saw her, Cassidy. She glided in through the revolving doors, like a celebrity arriving at a premiere, flowing camel-colored slacks, a crisp white silk blouse, a large designer handbag on her arm, and one of those obnoxious green juice concoctions in her hand. Her heels barely made a sound on the marble tile. She spotted me almost immediately and offered a smile that looked like it had been laminated onto her face. "Well, well," she said, her voice bright, brittle. "You're early." "I work here," I stated, my voice flat, devoid of inflection. "Ah, about that," she replied, taking a delicate sip from her green bottle. "We're just going through a little reorganization. You know, culture shift, streamlining for optimal efficiency." I just stared at her. "You mean a hostile takeover orchestrated by my own family?" She tilted her head, a small, patronizing smirk playing on her lips. "I prefer evolution, Sophia. Companies evolve." There was a beat of charged silence. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough so the goggle-eyed receptionist couldn't overhear. "You're welcome to shadow me this quarter, of course. Observe, learn the new direction, transition gracefully. Consider it an immersion experience." I didn't blink. "I founded this company, Cassidy. I built it from nothing. And now," she said smoothly, her eyes glinting with triumph, "you get to learn how to keep up with its new vision." The air between us felt like it crackled, thin and sharp like dry ice. I didn't say another word. I simply turned on my heel and walked back out through those same revolving doors, past Sal, the security guard, whose eyes darted down to his console again, this time not even bothering to try and meet mine. I reached my car, my hands surprisingly steady now. The initial shock, the searing grief, it was all cooling, congealing into something harder, sharper, and far more dangerous. Resolve. I opened my phone. 48 new emails. Subject line after subject line, screaming their cheerful betrayal. Excited for the new Reed Industries vision. Rebranding rollout, phase 1. Congratulations to CEO Cassidy Reed. Phenomenal new design direction. So fresh. I tapped one open. A press release preview. The branding images. They were mine. I'd sketched those initial concepts out on my dining room table 6 months ago, late one night, fueled by coffee and inspiration. The new company slogan? A line I'd crafted for a Forbes feature that had ultimately been shelved. The investor contact sheet attached to an internal memo outlining Cassidy's new strategic outreach plan. I had built that list name by painstaking name, coffee meeting by coffee meeting, handshake by handshake, and nowhere, not in the press kit, not in the internal comms, not in the goddamn footer of the email, was my name. Not a whisper. I didn't slam the phone down. I didn't scream into the empty car. I simply calmly forwarded the entire email chain with all its attachments to Marcus Thorne. In the subject line, I typed just one short pointed sentence. How much of Reed Industries do I actually own on paper again, Marcus? He responded within 60 seconds. His reply was equally brief. Enough, Sophia. Enough to make them very, very nervous. I leaned back against the leather seat, closed my eyes for a moment, and let the distant hum of city traffic buzz around me. I wasn't furious anymore, not in that hot, helpless way. I was focused, sharpened. Because if they wanted a war, dressed up in corporate jargon and family smiles, they were about to see what a woman looks like when she stops building with blueprints and starts building with fire. 3 days later, I stood outside the imposing marble lobby of Hawthorne and Sterling, the venerable downtown law firm where Reed Industries' earliest incorporation papers were notarized, where our first crucial Series A investment was signed, sealed, and delivered, and where my name, Sophia Reed, used to mean something significant. I had chosen this specific boardroom for a reason, not because it was neutral territory, far from it, but because it was historically significant territory. A junior associate, looking all of 22 and terrified, opened the heavy oak door for me with a nervous sidelong glance. I stepped inside. The carpet was a muted, oppressive navy, a tight, unforgiving weave with barely any give underfoot. Everything about the space screamed, "State your business, be concise, then leave." I wore black. Not funereal, not flashy, just precise. A soft, impeccably tailored wool suit I'd bought years ago for a deposition that, thankfully, never happened. My hair was pulled back in a severe chignon. My heels were low, but their sound on the parquet flooring just outside the carpeted area was firm, unwavering. Marcus Thorne stood as I entered, gave a single sharp nod, then gestured to the head of the long, polished walnut conference table, his silent way of saying, "This is your room, Sophia. Own it." Across from me, arranged like figures in a somber painting, sat 7 men and women. Most of them were silver-haired, their faces etched with years of boardroom battles, their expressions carefully neutral. Some I hadn't seen in years, some I'd pitched to, cajoled, convinced, and ultimately grown this company alongside. A few of them, I noted with a flicker of grim satisfaction, looked at me now with an expression that hovered somewhere between apology and a strange, reluctant awe. One of them, a Mr. Abernathy, a veteran board member who had once, after a particularly grueling presentation, told me I built empires, not just pitch decks, leaned in and murmured, his voice low, "You didn't deserve what they did, Sophia." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Marcus placed a thick, meticulously organized folder in front of me with the quiet reverence of a priest setting down holy scripture. "Shall we begin?" I said, my voice perfectly level, betraying none of the turmoil that had been my constant companion for the past 72 hours. No one objected. The air was thick with unspoken questions. I opened the folder and flipped directly to the tab labeled Governance. And there it was, the founding documents, the subsequent amendments, the voting structure breakdown, clear as day, and right beneath the dotted line on that infamous founder roll revision agreement, the one Harrison had triumphantly, if prematurely, announced to the public as finalized, a pristine, untouched blank space, no signature, no initials, no consent from Sophia Reed. I lifted the page, the paper crisp and cool between my fingers, and turned it slowly, deliberately, so that everyone at the table could see it. This, I said, my voice calm but carrying to every corner of the room, was the document my father, Harrison Reed, and my sister, Cassidy Reed, used as the basis for their transition announcement. The document they assured everyone was finalized. As you can plainly see, it never was. A collective intake of breath, a rustle of expensive fabric, the scrape of a chair. Paper rustled as people leaned closer, their eyes narrowed. Glasses were hastily adjusted. One board member, a notoriously skeptical woman named Ms. Albright, squinted at the document I held aloft, then asked, her voice sharp, "So the 62% controlling interest?" "Still mine," I confirmed, my gaze unwavering. "Undiluted, unchanged, and legally indisputable." The silence in the room deepened, not the awkward kind that begs to be filled, but the heavy, significant kind that acknowledges a fundamental realignment of power, a seismic shift. I didn't stop there. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single, concise page. No fancy formatting, no corporate spin, just a list. I passed it around the table. "These," I announced, "are the initial list of internal placements and expenditures that will be under immediate review over the next 30 days. Departments, key roles, recent budget allocations, ongoing project scopes." The names on that list were not random. Each one had been a recent appointment, ushered in by Cassidy. Each one had, in their own way, aligned their signature, their loyalty, to the attempted erasure of mine. "This isn't revenge, gentlemen, ladies," I added, my voice still even, still measured. "This is prudent risk management, and a necessary correction, of course." No one spoke. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his presence a silent reinforcement. "Ms. Reed," he stated formally, "is simply exercising her undeniable rights as the majority stakeholder and founder. The board's fiduciary duty, as you all know, is to uphold the integrity and stability of Reed Industries, not to protect or enable familial bias or improperly executed transitions." Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat, his earlier sympathy now tinged with concern. "What about the PR fallout from all this, Sophia? This could get messy." "I'll handle that," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "Truth, Mr. Abernathy, always makes for better, more enduring press than denial or spin." I let the silence stretch then, let the weight of my words, the weight of the documents, press into the very grain of that polished walnut table. Then I stood. Before gathering my things, I looked each of them in the eye, one by one, not with fury, not with accusation, but with the profound, unshakable calm that comes after the floodwaters have receded, revealing the landscape for what it truly is. I allowed my name, my contribution, to be minimized once, I said, my voice soft but carrying an undeniable finality. "It will not happen again." The room remained utterly still as I walked out, the decisive click of my heels on the marble floor just outside the boardroom, the only sound, slicing through their stunned disbelief. I didn't look back, but I knew with absolute certainty this was far from over. This was just the beginning of them understanding who they were truly dealing with. The rain had been coming down in sheets since late afternoon, a relentless gray deluge that soaked the city sidewalks and turned the familiar streets into a blur of glistening, distorted lights. By the time I finally got home, dragged myself up to my apartment, it was well past 9. My shoes left faint, muddy impressions on the usually pristine tile floor of my foyer. I dropped my damp coat on the hall hook, poured myself a large glass of water, the tap water tasting metallic and strange, and walked towards my home office. That small room, crammed with books and sketches, was the one place that still felt entirely like mine, a sanctuary, until I saw it. There on the floor, directly in front of my office door, was a stark crimson red envelope. No postage stamp, no return address. Just my name, Sophia Reed, scrawled across the front in thick, angular, aggressive strokes, like someone had carved it there with furious intent. I bent down slowly, picked it up. The paper felt thick, expensive. I stared at the wax seal on the back. It was the Reed family crest, the one my father used on the company's original founding letterhead, a symbol that once filled me with such pride. I didn't sit. I didn't even move to turn on a light. I tore it open right there, standing barefoot and shivering slightly in my dim hallway. A single sheet of heavy legal bond paper, cease and desist, in bold, uncompromising letters, from Reed Industries, signed by Harrison Reed's personal attorney. Effective immediately, it read, "You are to cease all hostile business activity, communications, and interference targeting Reed Industries, its executives, and its board members, or face immediate civil injunction and further legal remedies." I reread the lines 3, maybe 4 times, but the words didn't soften, didn't shift. They stayed just as sharp, just as brutally absurd as they were the moment I first laid eyes on them. My own father, my own family, had declared all-out legal war. Not even a phone call, not a conversation, just a formal, sealed warning left at my door like I was a common criminal, a stranger, or worse, an enemy. I walked, almost in a daze, to my desk, the offending paper still clutched in my hand, and woke my laptop. That's when things got weirder. It took longer than usual to boot up. The internal fan roared like a tiny, distressed animal. The screen blinked erratically twice, then finally settled into my normal desktop. Almost too normal. Then I noticed it. A strange, unfamiliar icon pulsing faintly in the bottom corner of the taskbar, and a project folder, one I hadn't opened in weeks, suddenly showed its last accessed time as 9:32 p.m. tonight. I hadn't touched it. My blood ran cold. Before I could even begin to process what that meant, my phone, lying on the desk beside me, rang, shattering the tense silence. It was Marcus. His voice, usually so calm, was tight, urgent. "Sophia, you need to change all your passwords. Right now, everything." "Marcus, what happened? What's going on?" "They're leaking your journal, Sophia. Selective entries, screenshots. It started on a couple of those sleazy gossip blogs, and now some of the smaller startup news sites are picking it up. The headlines, God, Sophia, they're not good." My stomach twisted into a sickening knot. With trembling fingers, I clicked open my web browser, and there it was. Founder's mental breakdown revealed in private pages. Delusional Diary of a Fallen CEO, Sophia Reed's shocking confessions. She built a brand, then lost herself in it. The tragic tale of Reed Industries' ousted visionary. Beneath the lurid headlines were scanned images of my handwriting, entries ripped brutally out of context. A line I'd written during a particularly low point after my mother's first chemo treatment, filled with fear and doubt. Another scribbled in despair after my painful breakup with Ethan 2 years ago. My private pain, my vulnerabilities, my moments of human weakness, all twisted, curated, and painted as evidence of chronic instability, of a mind unraveling. And yet, the chilling part was, nothing was outright fabricated, just grotesquely distorted, weaponized. I shut the laptop slowly, my hand visibly trembling now. For a long moment, I couldn't hear anything but the storm still raging outside, the relentless sound of rain hitting the windows like thousands of tiny, angry fists. I walked into the kitchen and stood in front of the tall, antique mirror that leaned against one wall, the one I'd found at a flea market years ago. My reflection stared back at me, tired, pale, damp hair clinging to my forehead, completely barefaced. But not broken, definitely not broken. In my other hand, I still held that damn cease and desist letter. So, I said softly, my voice a low murmur in the quiet room, addressing my own reflection. They really want war, do they? I turned, walked decisively to the small printer I kept in the corner of the room, and opened a blank document on my desktop. I typed one single sentence, just one. The day they tried to erase me, I started taking notes. I printed it out. Plain black ink on plain white paper. No emotion, just fact. I took the page, slid it into a clear protective sleeve, and then I laid it deliberately, almost ceremoniously, on top of that crimson red envelope from my father. That was my answer. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't spin their narrative. I'd let the unvarnished truth speak, and I would make damn sure they heard every single carefully documented word. And oh, they were about to learn just how incredibly thorough those notes were. The morning after the storm, the city air felt washed clean, sharp, and cool. I walked into Marcus Thorne's sleek downtown office. No makeup, no apologies in my demeanor. Just a worn leather folder under my arm, my phone in my hand, and the kind of profound silence that carried more weight than 1,000 angry words. He didn't ask how I'd slept. We both knew the answer to that. He simply slid a thick manila folder across his polished mahogany desk towards me. "Therein, Sophia," he said, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of satisfaction, "lies the kingdom. Every share certificate, every transfer document, every shell layer meticulously verified and accounted for. The holding structure for Reed Industries is now officially and unequivocally under your sole legal name and control." I stared at the final signature pages, my own name clear and bold. My hands didn't shake. They shouldn't. After all, this wasn't about revenge, not really. This was history being corrected. This was truth asserting itself. "It was never about taking it from them, Marcus," I said, almost to myself, the words forming slowly. "It's about showing them, irrefutably, that they never truly had it to begin with, not in the ways that mattered." Marcus allowed himself a faint, knowing smile. "Then let's go show them, shall we?" The sun dipped low behind the jagged Chicago skyline, painting the clouds in bruised shades of purple and orange as I stepped out of the black town car in front of the Langham. Friday evening, the annual Innovators of Tomorrow charity gala. Cameras were already flashing like agitated fireflies outside the grand revolving doors. I knew the floor plan of this hotel by heart. The main ballroom had been the site of our very first major investor dinner, way back when Reed Industries was little more than a bold idea scribbled on a stack of cocktail napkins and a whole lot of my sweat equity. Now it looked like a damn coronation. Cassidy's coronation, if the pre-event buzz was to be believed. Inside, everything glittered. Silver and white, the theme of the night, dripped from the chandeliers, adorned the tables, and reflected in the polished dance floor. My father, Harrison, was already seated at a prominent table near the front, a custom lapel pin, the Reed Industries logo, of course, catching the light. Cassidy, in a breathtaking champagne-colored silk gown that probably cost a small fortune, was laughing coquettishly at something one of the event hosts was saying, her fingers toying elegantly with a crystal flute of champagne. She didn't see me enter, or perhaps, in the simple, understated black velvet column dress I wore, she simply didn't recognize me. My dress wasn't flashy, but it was sharp, deliberate, understated power. People stared, though. Oh, yes, they stared. But not in the way they used to, not with polite deference or admiration. Now, it was with a kind of hushed uncertainty, their eyes flicking towards me, then towards my family's table, as if trying to quickly assess which side of this very public, very messy war I was currently on. I took my assigned seat in the fourth row, not up front with the lions, not hidden in the back with the mice, just there, present, visible. A few moments later, after the clinking of glasses and murmur of conversation subsided, the host, a well-known local philanthropist, took the stage. After the usual charity highlights, the thank yous, the obligatory applause breaks, he cleared his throat, a slightly more serious expression on his face. "And now," he announced, his voice resonating through the grand ballroom, "it is my distinct honor and profound pleasure to welcome our final honoree of the evening, a true founder, a relentless innovator, and a name that has become synonymous with legacy and vision in our city. Please join me in celebrating Ms. Sophia Reed, this year's Pioneer of the Year." I didn't move at first. I just let the announcement hang in the suddenly still air. Then I stood slowly, deliberately. A hush, a tangible wave of silence, spread through the ballroom faster than any applause could have. I made my way to the stage, my gaze fixed forward, not once looking at my family's table. The click of my heels on the temporary stage flooring echoed far louder than I expected in the cavernous room. At the podium, the beaming host extended a large, ornate plaque towards me. I shook my head, a small, almost imperceptible movement. "I didn't come here tonight to accept anything," I said, my voice steady, amplified by the microphone, reaching every corner of the suddenly silent room. "I came to correct the record." A flicker of confusion, then alarm, crossed the host's face. He instinctively stepped back, giving me the stage. I reached into the slim leather portfolio tucked under my arm and pulled out a single page. Signed, stamped, notarized, official. "This," I said, holding the document up for all to see, then bringing it close to the microphone so the rustle of the paper itself was audible, "is the undisputed ownership structure of Reed Holdings International, the parent company of Reed Industries, as of 3 days ago, finalized, verified, and legally recognized under all applicable federal and state laws." I turned my gaze then slowly, deliberately, towards the front row, directly at my sister. "My sister, Cassidy Reed," I announced, my voice ringing with cold, clear certainty, "was never the CEO of Reed Industries, not legally, not financially, not in any version of reality where truth and due process actually matter." Gasps rippled through the room like a sudden, unexpected thunderclap. Cassidy shot to her feet, her face flushed a blotchy, furious red beneath her perfect makeup. "That's a lie," she snapped, her voice shrill, cracking. "Dad, tell them it's a lie." But Harrison didn't stand. He didn't move. He just stared at the paper in my hand, his face ashen, as if the document itself had burst into flames. Cassidy turned back to me, her eyes blazing. "You signed the revision years ago. I saw it. We all did." I allowed myself a small, quiet smile, a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "No, Cassidy," I said, my voice dropping slightly, drawing the audience in. "You saw a draft, a proposal. What you, and apparently my father, never bothered to verify was the final executed version. The one I considered, and ultimately, the one I never signed." I looked back out at the hundreds of stunned faces in the audience. "The truth," I continued, my voice regaining its strength, "is actually quite simple. The corporate structure you've all praised tonight, the innovative brand you've admired, the very investors you've invited to this prestigious event, they were and they remain mine. My vision, my capital, my work." I paused, letting that sink in. I didn't build Reed Industries for public credit or accolades. I built it because I believed in something bigger than my own name. But since that name, my name, Sophia Reed, has been so publicly dragged through the mud, systematically erased, and callously exploited, tonight I am here to formally and publicly reclaim it. The silence in the room wasn't empty anymore. It was charged, electric, like the moment of absolute stillness just before a lightning strike. And just as I turned, as if to leave the stage, I leaned back into the microphone one last time. Oh, and one more thing, I added, my voice dropping to an almost conversational, yet still perfectly amplified tone. And then I said it, the words that made the entire room, every single person in it, gasp audibly. I didn't inherit this company. I built it. And for the last 8 years, since the downturn of 2016, I have been almost single-handedly funding its major expansions and innovations alone. The silence that followed that statement wasn't polite. It was stunned, utterly, profoundly stunned. One of those rare, crystalline moments where you feel like even the champagne in 1,000 glasses has stopped bubbling. I stepped back from the podium, handed the microphone to the still gobsmacked host without a word, and walked off the stage. By the time I reached the quiet corridor leading to the private suites, my phone was already buzzing, vibrating frantically in my clutch. Texts, dozens of them, then hundreds. A junior staffer from one of the tech startups being honored, barely out of undergrad, had apparently recorded my entire speech on her phone from her seat near the back of the ballroom. And bless her audacious Gen Z heart, she'd uploaded it directly to TikTok within minutes. Somehow, her shaky amateur angle had caught everything. My unwavering voice, Cassidy's face contorting in disbelief, then fury. My father's stunned, frozen silence. No filters, no slick edits, just raw, unvarnished, real-time exposure. The caption she'd added, when the family scapegoat finally flips the script, live, boss move, corporate feud, truth bomb. By the time I stepped into the elevator, the clip had already been viewed over 70,000 times. By the time I reached the executive suite upstairs, where I knew they'd be waiting, a major national news network had already picked up the story for a breaking segment on their late-night broadcast. Corporate blood feud goes public in Chicago. Heiress's gala mic drop stuns elite. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. I just walked into the opulent hotel suite where my father and Cassidy were, predictably waiting. The air inside was thick, stale, like expensive velvet curtains and cloying perfume, trying desperately to mask the scent of something rotten, something decaying. My father sat heavily by the ridiculously stocked minibar, swirling a glass of amber liquid he hadn't actually sipped. Cassidy was pacing, her heels clicking like tiny, angry hammers on the marble floor. "You blindsided us?" she hissed, her voice raw with fury, before I'd even fully shut the door behind me. "You humiliated this family, in front of investors, the press, everyone." "I corrected a lie, Cassidy," I said calmly, my voice even. "Several lies, actually, if we're being precise." My father straightened his tie, a small, fussy gesture, but he still didn't look directly at me. "We should have known you'd pull something like this, Sophia. That callous streak of yours. Your mother always said it came from your grandmother." I almost laughed. "You think this is about temperament, Dad? This is about years of calculated decisions made behind my back. Money siphoned from my projects to fund Cassidy's vanity ventures. Credit for my successes systematically stripped away. My legacy, the one I bled for, casually reassigned like it was a spare office." Cassidy rolled her eyes, a theatrical gesture of disdain. "Oh, please. You're not a martyr, Sophia. You're just bitter. You were never the pretty face, the marketable one. I didn't react to the petty barb. Instead, I walked to the large conference table in the center of the suite and opened my briefcase. One by one, I laid out 3 slim, precisely labeled folders. The first was titled Ownership and Proxy Transfers, Reed Holdings International. The second, Private Capital Contributions and Loan Guarantees, S. Reed. And the third, the final one, Resignation Agreements and Liability Transfer, C. Reed and H. Reed. You want to keep spinning this as a simple family restructuring or a new strategic vision? I said, my voice quiet but firm. Fine, but the numbers, Dad, Cassidy, they're clean, they're audited, and they've already been filed with the full board of Reed Industries as of this afternoon. I tapped the folders. Every dollar I personally put in, every contract I upheld when you two faltered, every single deal I closed without your input or assistance, it's all in here, documented, verified. And now, I paused, meeting each of their stunned, angry gazes in turn. It's time for you both to decide how you want to leave this story, quietly or very, very loudly. My father finally spoke, his voice low, cold, and laced with a dawning, horrified understanding. This isn't how family handles things, Sophia. I looked him directly in the eye then, all pretense gone. No, Dad. Family handles things face to face, with honesty, with respect, not with hacked personal emails and anonymous cease and desist orders shoved under my apartment door in the middle of the night. He flinched, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but I saw it. Cassidy crossed her arms, her earlier bravado crumbling into a sullen defiance. You can't just force us out. This is our company too. I didn't blink. No, I can't force you. But the board, armed with these documents and the truth of the last decade, most certainly can. And trust me, if you don't sign these resignation agreements tonight, they will convene an emergency session on Monday morning, and it will be far messier for everyone involved. The room went utterly still. The only sound was the distant wail of a siren from the city streets far below. Cassidy reached for the pen first. Her hand trembled, a tiny betraying tremor, but she didn't hesitate for long. She signed her name with a vicious, angry slash. My father stared at the documents for a much longer time. His eyes scanned the pages, but we both knew he wasn't really reading the legal jargon. He was reading the end of an era, his era. He finally picked up the pen and signed, his signature uncharacteristically shaky. I didn't linger. I left the signed folders where they lay on the polished table and walked towards the hallway, my heels steady on the plush carpet, my breath slow and even in my chest. As I reached the door, I heard someone from the gala commotion downstairs call my name. Maybe a reporter, sensing more blood in the water. Maybe a curious guest. I didn't turn around. There was absolutely nothing left to explain. Outside, the night air was crisp, washed clean by the earlier rain. The streets of Chicago shimmered, reflecting the city lights in the wet gleam of the pavement. I got into the car that was waiting for me at the curb and closed the door behind me without a word to the driver. My phone buzzed again in my hand. The TikTok clip. It had just hit 1 million views. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I didn't feel erased. I felt almost weightless, like a great suffocating burden had finally, blessedly, been lifted. At sunrise the next morning, I drove to the place where it all really started, and I ended it. My way. The quiet tree-lined street in Oak Park hadn't changed much. Same overgrown lilac hedges spilling onto the sidewalk. Same cracked flagstone path that still lifted up at the far edge where the ancient oak tree's roots relentlessly pushed the pavement skyward. The same slightly rusted forest green mailbox that had leaned a little to the left since 1996, the year we moved in, but the woman stepping out of the car today, crisp and cool in the early morning light, wasn't the hopeful, naive girl who once stood on this very spot, backpack slipping off one shoulder, dreams clenched tight in a sweaty palm. I walked up the familiar front steps, no keys in my hand this time, no welcome mat on the porch, just the undeniable echo of history in the way the morning light slanted across the chipped paint on the porch railing, the paint I'd helped Dad apply one hot July. My name was never on the deed to this house, not until last week. A quiet, unpublicized acquisition, sealed through a private LLC I'd set up years ago for just such possibilities. Turns out, my father had heavily mortgaged our childhood home to fund one of Cassidy's ill-fated luxury lifestyle brand expansion deals about 5 years ago. When the market inevitably turned and her venture tanked, he defaulted quietly, discreetly, hoping, I suppose, that no one in the family would ever notice. I noticed. I didn't tell them I was the anonymous buyer who snapped it up before it hit foreclosure. I don't think I ever will. Inside, the air was still. Not stale, not sad, just waiting. The old hardwood floors creaked in exactly the same places I remembered from countless midnight raids on the cookie jar. The kitchen window, the one overlooking the bird feeder, still caught the early morning light around 8 a.m., sending golden shafts onto the exact same spot of slightly worn linoleum tile where I used to sit with my bowl of cereal and a stack of library books, dreaming of building cities. Room by room, I walked through the silent house, the small bedroom that was once mine, the faded peach blossom wallpaper long gone, now painted in soft, neutral creams and gentle greens, ready for someone new, someone needing a fresh start. The framed photograph that used to sit on my childhood dresser, a faded picture of me at age 10, proudly holding up a truly terrible clay dragon I'd made in art class. The one my mother had once unceremoniously thrown out during a decluttering phase with a cold, "Don't get sentimental over junk, Sophia," now hung in the front foyer, carefully restored, its tiny bronze frame still bearing the faint scuff mark I'd given it when I was 11. But this time, seeing it didn't make my heart ache with old hurts. It just was. I laid a thick manila envelope on the clean kitchen counter. Inside, the final property transfer documents, the incorporation paperwork for a new nonprofit foundation, and a single handwritten card addressed simply to the new residents. This house, this piece of my history, wasn't for me to live in again. It was now a transitional home, fully funded under the newly established Sophia Reed Foundation, dedicated to serving women who were starting over, rebuilding their lives after upheaval. One of the sunniest upstairs bedrooms, the one with the new floral quilt and the comfortable reading chair by the window, already bore a small, discreet brass nameplate on its door. For Evelyn Reed, may you find the voice here that you so often denied to others. Irony, I've learned, doesn't heal deep wounds, but sometimes it can speak a certain kind of truth. Later that afternoon, back in my own sun-drenched apartment overlooking the lake, I sat by the window, a familiar fountain pen in my hand, a half-written letter on the desk in front of me. "Dear Mom and Dad," it began, "I'm not writing this for closure. I think I stopped needing that from you the day you stopped pretending to listen, to truly see me. This was never just about money or titles or who got the bigger office. It was about all the quiet, insidious ways you allowed me to disappear, piece by piece, until you needed something tangible from me to sell, to leverage, to claim as your own." I paused, then continued writing. "But I've learned something profound through all this. You don't actually owe your children love, not in the way storybooks pretend. That's a gift, not an obligation. But I, Sophia Reed, owed myself respect. And that respect, that was always, always mine to give, and mine to reclaim." I folded the letter carefully and slid it into a desk drawer. I won't mail it. It's not for them anymore. It's for me. The next morning, I met someone for coffee. A small, independent cafe a couple of blocks from the lakefront, the kind with mismatched chairs and amazing pastries. She was young, sharp as a tack, her eyes full of that same quiet, burning fire I used to try so hard to choke down before walking into those sterile, male-dominated boardrooms. They told me I should wait my turn, she said, her voice a mix of frustration and defiance, stirring her latte a little too vigorously, that my ideas are too ambitious for someone at my level. I took a slow sip of my tea, then met her gaze. Don't, I said. She looked at me, confused. Don't what? Don't wait, I clarified. Don't ask for space at their table. Don't hope for their permission. If they won't give you a seat, build your own damn table and make it bigger and better than theirs ever was. She smiled then, a real smile. Not polite, not hesitant, but wide and bright and full of a dawning recognition, like she was finally seeing herself, her own potential, clearly. As I walked out of the cafe, the bell over the door jingling softly, I passed a newsstand on the corner. The headline of the city paper was still running a version of the story. Daughter turns the tables on Reed dynasty in shocking power play. But that wasn't the real story, not anymore. The real story was that I didn't burn it all down just for revenge. I rebuilt something better, something stronger, on my own terms, with no need for their applause and no space for their ghosts. And if you're listening to my story right now, maybe something in it resonated with you. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into something, built it from the ground up, only to be pushed aside, your voice silenced, by the very people you trusted, the ones you did it all for? Did you walk away, or did you find a way to reclaim your narrative, your power, your truth? I genuinely love to hear about your experiences. Please share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Your stories, your resilience, they're part of this healing journey too. And if my story touched you, consider subscribing for more, or even supporting the channel with a super thanks. It truly helps us continue to share these voices. Thank you for listening.